a bit more about objects. We can create an object using an object literal, curly braces. 2 ways we learned to add properties. We could do it inside the literal, key colon value. Quotation marks are optional on the key as long as the key doesn't have spaces and dashes in it and stuff like that. Or we could add the property after the fact using the dot or the square brackets, right? And the value could be anything. We've put strings in there. We've put other objects in there. We've put functions in there. This is an array. You can totally do that. It can be whatever. Functions as properties, we call those methods. We could do it like this, using the dot syntax, add it after the fact. We've mostly been doing that inside the literal, but no reason we can't do this. Totally works. To access a property, we have 2 ways. Dot or curly brace. Square bracket. Right? Same thing. If you use the square bracket, it expects a string, so you could use a string literal or pass in a variable that holds the correct string. And then we learned a lot about functions and the binding of this within them. We learned how to make functions using regular old function expressions, the original way to do it. The word function, the name of the thing, the argument list, and the actual content. Or we could assign functions to variables, put an anonymous function on the right side of an assignment. Totally works. Slightly different in that hoisting doesn't work with these. When you use a function expression, you could call that function higher up in the code than where you define it, as long as it's within the same variable scope. But you cannot use a variable before you've defined it, so that doesn't work when you do it this way. So those are very similar, those 2 things, but as we learned, arrow functions are slightly different. So, calling a function. Basic way, just regular old function invocation, parentheses. Here we're calling sum. So when we invoke sum that way, what is this going to be set to inside sum? You do not need any more context than this to answer this question. It doesn't matter where that function lives. It doesn't matter what's going on around it. If this is how we call it, this is always going to be what, Tom? Window. Not useful in the slightest, but that's what it's going to be. What if we do it the same way except we use an arrow function? We're still doing it as a variable assignment, and we're still calling it using parentheses. Now what's this going to be? Is it still going to be window? Not necessarily. It's going to be whatever this is at that point in the code. So in this case, it does matter where sum was defined. So say const sum there appeared on line 13. Whatever this was on line 12, it's going to be inside sum. That's what the arrow function does. The arrow function automatically binds this to whatever it is at that time. So that no matter where you call it from, that's what it's going to be. It's going to be predictable. Sometimes it's what you want, sometimes it isn't. But now you know arrow functions work that way. What if it's an event listener? What if a function is an event listener? What's this? An event handler, excuse me. What if you set up an event listener with a certain function as its handler? What's this going to be if we don't do anything to change it? Close. It's going to be the target of the event, right? This next slide is actually a lie, which is why I didn't flip over to it. In this case, it's not the event target because I used an arrow function. And the arrow function binds this to whatever this was at that point in the code. Ordinarily, if it's not an arrow function, whatever, there's a lot wrong with that actually. I don't have the first argument there either. That's a terrible slide. I left out the event. But ordinarily, when you add an event listener, whatever function you pass in, when that runs, this is going to be the target of the event. No matter where that function lives, if it's part of an object or not, doesn't matter. This is going to be bound to the event target. Unless you use an arrow function or unless you use bind. So speaking of objects, methods, functions as object properties. Explode here is a method of thing. So we could call that with thing.explode, right? So if we call thing.explode, what is this inside explode? On 3, Zoe and Jules. 1, 2, 3. No. You said window, I heard you. Zoe, here, okay. Here's the scenario. The boss comes in. No. The boss has to leave the room. And just then, the big client comes in the door. And they're like, boy, I wish somebody would tell me what this is bound to inside this explode function. I need someone really confident, or they're not going to get my business. Who can tell me? Who can tell me? Will no one tell me? Oh, hello. I believe it is thing. You're correct. Don't make me believe it. I don't know. I mean, these people are all counting on you not to lead them astray. Say it like you mean it. You're gosh darn right, it's the thing. Thank you very much. Right? Why? Not necessarily because explode was defined inside thing, but because of the way we called it. Because we called it as a method using the dot syntax. That makes a difference. So let's look at a couple of other examples. Thank you, and I'm sorry. Yeah, Skylar.
Would it work if it was inside the function?
If which was inside the function?
The thing.explode.
Let me see if I can address that. Let's go to CodePen. I'm going to make a little CodePen, and we're going to play around with this a little more. Yeah.
So basically, the thing makes a call to explode, and explode makes a call to alert. Is that what happens?
Yes. Those things happen in that order. So let's say I can put a button here. Type equals button. Click me. Okay. JavaScript. Let's grab that button. Document.query selector. Button. Add event listener, click, and some function. Let's write a function. Function, say yeah, yeah. Actually, let's make this more interesting. Const app equals some object with a method called say yeah. So kind of like the example on the last slide. And let's console log yeah this. Okay, and let's call this dot say yeah. First, never mind this. Let's keep it just like the slide. Let's call app dot say yeah. Okay? Let's get our console ready here. Yeah, object. Which object? It's app, right? So what if we do this? It's the same function, right? It's this dot say yeah, app dot say yeah. First of all, why don't I put parentheses there? Because then it wouldn't be the function, it would be the return value of the function, which at the moment is a whole lot of nothing, undefined. Add event listener, we tell it the event, and we tell it what to do. This has to be a function, not the result of calling a function. Predictions, what's it going to be? Right now, it's the object. It's app. What's it going to be? It's the same exact method. We're calling the same dang function. Could this be two different things inside the same function, just depending on how it's called? What do you think, David? Is that possible? Is that too weird? Can we live in that reality? Let's see what happens. Who thinks they know what it's going to be? Kyle, what's it going to be? Jaden, what do you think? Tom? So they can hear you in the back. It's going to be the target of the event because it's an event handler? That sounds familiar. Let's see. Let's just save that. Whoops. Oh, yeah, I guess I have to click it first, right? It's never actually running that. Click it. Yeah, object HTML button element. Yeah, it's the button. When it happens as the result of a click, the very same method has this bound to something else, because it depends on how it's invoked, not just where you define it. What if I wanted it to be the object again? What if I, you know what? Let's try this. What if I say app say yeah dot bind French toast. Click. Yeah, French toast. So when you use bind, it binds this to whatever you put inside French toast. I mean, whatever you put inside bind. Whatever you put inside bind, that will become this. Now, when we've actually done this, gosh dang that word. Whenever we've done it in the past, we've always put the word this in here because usually we do it because we want this to remain what it is right now. But whatever you put inside bind, that will become the value of this inside that function when it's called. So again, what if I say app say yeah right now? What's it going to be again? It's going to be the object. Yep. Okay. What if I say bind here? Can I do that? Dot bind. Huh? Yeah, huh? We've used that for event handlers because that's a case where this has been assigned to something other than what we wanted. But anytime you want to change this to be something very specific, you can do it. Now, why did I put bind there instead of here? Why didn't I do that? He's right. Anybody hear him? Anybody else know? Who isn't like sitting right next to him? Why didn't I put bind there? I put it on the other side of the parentheses. Why? What am I calling bind on here? What's to the left of the dot? Yeah, sorry?
So you're calling bind after the function's already ran, so this has already been set to something, and that's just the return value.
So app say yeah, open close parens is the return value of running that thing, right? So I'm calling bind on whatever that returns, which happens to be undefined. That doesn't do me any good. I have to call bind on a function. So I get the raw function, say yeah, say bind woot. Then I call it. Yeah, woot. So what if I, one sec. What if I do this? What if I say something is app.say yeah bind, and then I call say something? Same thing, right? Yeah.
I was going to ask, why did you need an extra set of parentheses?
So these parentheses go with bind. Now, everything I have on that line right now, that whole thing is a function, because bind returns a function. Bind returns a function with the rules changed, right? So if I want to call it, I stick open close parentheses on there. And that's going to call the bound version of say yeah. Make sense? Help clear up why bind isn't on the other side of those. Everybody dig it?